It's kind of crazy to think that as recently as 30 years ago, if you wanted to make beer in your home, you'd have to break the law. Thankfully, in 1978, it became legal on the federal level for people to homebrew, but unfortunately, this didn't include everyone, as certain states continued to restrict this natural right. But this all ended in 2013 when the last two holdouts, Mississippi and Alabama, passed laws making it okay for people to make beer at home. For the first time since Prohibition, it was legal to homebrew in all 50 of the United States. This was due in large part to the dedication and hard work of the American Homebrewers Association. In addition to continuing the fight for our right to brew, they're committed to growing the hobby by coordinating events such as Big Brew for National Homebrew Day and HomebrewCon. We're proud to say that the Brülosophy podcast is brought to you by the American Homebrewers Association and encourage all of our listeners to support the organization that has done so much for this hobby by becoming a member today.
Welcome back to the Brülosophy podcast. I'm your host, Marshall Schott, and joining me on this episode is contributor Jason Cipriani to talk about a topic that we've experimented with a couple of times. I think it's something familiar to most homebrewers, and that's bagging your hops.
Yeah, this is one of those topics that is shrouded in mystery somewhat, but also a hot topic, especially at homebrew club meetings and whatnot.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things that I think it goes unthought of by a lot of homebrewers. You either just do it or you don't do it. I know that there are some opinions, probably not terribly strong, but there are definitely some opinions as to the benefits or the lack thereof of bagging one's hops. And this goes for kettle hops as well as dry hops. Again, we've experimented with both of those, and we're going to talk about that in a bit. These days I've started bagging my dry hops again for various reasons, but I'm not using a bag. I'm using like a stainless sleeve. Are you? What are you doing? I know you have some pumps involved in your setup.
Yeah, originally I started off not bagging anything, and then once I got to using pumps and I had a clog and a very long transfer of wort to the fermenter, I started bagging. I actually made a hop spider myself, and then now I'm doing a little bit of a hybrid where during the boil I'm actually putting hops in without any sort of bag, and I'm dry hopping with just regular muslin bags now.
Right on. Yeah, there are various reasons people are gonna try to filter their hops out of their wort and their beer, and we're gonna get into that in a bit. We'll talk about hop spiders and what you can do to keep hops out of your wort if that's what you choose to do. But first, we've got some announcements we want to get through. First off, if you live anywhere where we live in any of the cities that I'm going to mention, and you want to participate in our experiments and our hop chronicles and all of the tastings and stuff that we do, please let me know. Marshall@brülosophy.com. I'll hook you up with a contributor nearest you. We have got contributors in Chicago, Illinois, Denver, Colorado, Pueblo, Colorado, Anchorage, Alaska, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, soon to be Atlanta, Georgia, Corona, California, and right here in Fresno, California. Seriously, we appreciate anyone who is willing to lend their palate to brewing science. It's a lot of fun, and again, we'd really like to get you involved. So just hit me up, shoot me an email, and I'll connect you with that contributor who lives near you. We've gotten a lot of people over the last couple of months through just emailing me who've been able to hook up with some of our contributors, and they're having fun. This year, HomebrewCon is going to be in Portland, Oregon. They've got a ton of great beer there, such a rad scene. And not only that, Brülosophy is working with Yakima Valley hops and Imperial yeast to create an experience you do not want to miss. We are going together on a big booth. We're going to have all kinds of rad stuff. Really, really unique experience. And when you put the minds of people like us together, there's no way this isn't going to be something you don't want to miss. It's going to be epic. I hate that word, but it's going to be epic. Trust me. Speaking of Imperial yeast, we've been using their yeast for the last 7 or 8 months now. And I'm telling you, my experience with their yeast has been better than any yeast I've used before. They package 200 billion cells. So you're getting almost double what you get from, other yeast labs. And all of their stuff is super clean, starts fermentation quickly, and really attenuates well. Jason, I know you just pitched something. I think you just made a cider recently with one of their yeasts.
I did. Yeah, I pitched it flagship, their flagship yeast in a cider 2 or 3 days ago, and the thing was bubbling away just a few hours later. It's crazy how fast their yeast takes off, and I never put oxygenate my wort or anything like that. Where I know some of us do, but with any of the imperial stuff, it's always taken off pretty fast.
Yeah, it's I'll be honest, like this sounds like maybe I'm encouraging poor practices, but with any of my beers now that are under, about 1060 OG, I might just make a quick vitality starter, before brewing. But even just pitching a straight can, I've had awesome experience. You can check out Imperial stuff at imperialyeast.com. They've got a pretty good selection right now. I have a feeling it's going to be growing in time. So, but yeah, check out their stuff. They've got all the good yeast that you want to use to make your beer. All right, we've got a little bit of feedback. Not much came in over the last week, but something I want to address. I get a lot of emails from people asking about contributing to Brülosophy, and I thought this was an appropriate topic to address because of the fact that Jason, you are the latest contributor. Maybe you can give some insight as to what, how annoying it is to get to jump through all the loopholes to become a contributor to Brülosophy. One of the things that I think scares people away is when I tell them they have to have 2 identical brewing setups in order to do this. I love that people want to contribute. I really do. And I'd love to be able to say yes to everyone. And the fact that I take this so seriously might seem kind of banal to some people, but whatever. There's a lot that goes into having to do this. Yeah. I mean, what's it been like for you so far?
So, I was one of those people, emailed you and was like, hey, let's talk about me contributing and what that would look like for both of us. And from there, it was a slow process. And that was going through and having discussions about equipment setup and practices and even shipping you beer to taste yourself to make sure I was on the up and up with my brewing practices. and then, and there was also some adjustments I needed to make with my equipment. But once we got over that hump, yeah, you're right, man. There's a lot of work that goes into this, aligning up, tasters and making sure the schedule of when you're brewing and what's fermenting and when it's all ready. There's a lot that goes into it and a lot more than I expected, but man, it's a blast.
Yeah. So, and that's the thing. I feel like a jerk when people reach out because like I said, I mean, I love that people are inspired by us to want it so much that they would want to join us and create content that we get to put out there with our stamp on it. Brülosophy gets kind of dinged sometimes for looking like, you guys are just doing science in your garage, and that's fine. I don't argue with people who say that, but I really take, doing these things as cleanly as possible seriously. I want our data to be as valid as homebrewing data can be. And so the reason it takes so long for me to kind of vet new contributors is because I really need to ensure that that's a good choice, and there are going to be times when we mess up or whatever. And I want to make sure that those mess ups are kept to they're so limited and that they're easy to fix, I guess. Okay. There was no more feedback, over the last week. So we'll keep it to that. If you have any feedback or questions you want answered on our Brew and A episodes, send them to feedback@brülosophy.com, or you can drop them on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or any of the other online forums we frequent. If you're looking for a way to throw some support our way, head over to brülosophy.com/support, where you'll find a list of links to use whenever you shop at the places you're already shopping at. You won't feel a thing. We get a small commission that helps to keep us going. If you want a little something in return for your support, check out our Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month, you'll be granted access to never before published Brülosophy recipes, receive invites to monthly video chats, and you can even work with us to design your very own experiment. That's patreon.com/Brülosophy. Please make sure to subscribe to the Brülosophy podcast and leave a review wherever it is you listen to your podcast. Okay, it's time for the 1-minute beer review with Jersey and Tim. And for this one, I served my friends one of my favorite beers, one of my favorite seasonal beers around the holidays, and that was Sierra Nevada Celebration Ale. I absolutely love this beer. It's a classic. I buy multiple 12 packs every season when it comes out. In fact, I'm always a little bit sad when it goes away. And so Jersey and Tim were over here a couple months ago. It was the first, freshest 12-pack I bought. In fact, the bottle was less than 3 weeks from being packaged. And I served them the beer blind to just see what they think about it.
1 minute beer review with Jersey and Tim.
I just met this beer and I don't know what to think of it. Look at it.
Yeah, looks like beer.
Looks darky. I like it. Darker beer night. Did you smell it?
I did smell it.
And what were your first impressions?
I have nothing.
I smell nothing.
Yeah, it's IPA.
I have a feeling.
I would drink this. I like it.
It's not bad. It's actually pretty good.
Is it IPA?
Don't make us look stupid. We have no idea what
I
this
have
is.
no idea.
Let's put our junk out there. I think it's an IPA.
But it doesn't have the
We
lingering...
submit that it is an IPA. We have nothing to hide, officer. I'll tell you this. I like it. If this were the only beer I got to drink the rest of the day, I'd be all right with that. Would you be all right with that,
I
Timmy?
would be.
We think that this is an IPA. If we are wrong, Timmy, we lose all credibility.
Did we have any credibility?
Yes, the whole world needs to know if we like a beer, and if we don't like it, they won't drink it.
Glad you think so.
Let's run this through the Brewing Advisor 7000. This is an IPA. I like it.
It's not staying in my mouth forever.
On a scale of 0 to leave your wife for this beer, where are you putting it?
Wow. Probably 5.
Well, I mean, I made the scale pretty high.
It's not my kind of beer, though. But
It could be a
I would
scale of
drink it.
0 to 1,000. You don't know where leave your wife is, so how about a scale of 0 to 10?
All right, we're going to go with 8.
I'm going to give it a 6.9.
Nah.
I think it's better than that.
Yes.
Yes, they liked it. I cannot believe that they liked it. In fact, Tim is known for not liking IPA. He's the one who called it out as being an IPA, and he actually enjoyed it. Sierra Nevada's doing something right. Jason, you ever have this beer?
No, I haven't.
What?
And I know, man.
Do they not? You live in Pueblo, Colorado. Does Sierra Nevada not distribute out there? Come on now.
Oh no, we definitely have it. It's not been something I've ever picked up, but obviously I'm gonna have to do it now.
Yeah, obviously. In fact, you're on hiatus until you do. That beer is so amazing.
What? Oh man.
It's funny if you get on Facebook or social media around the holidays and you have anybody who is into beer as your friends. Everybody's posting about Sierra Nevada Celebration Ale, it seems, and for good reason. It's a fantastic beer. It's got that classic hop character that I expect from like a mid 2000s, early 2000s IPA with this just beautiful kind of maltiness that's not too rich. Everything about that beer I love. Can't wait until next year already just to drink some more of it. And I'm really glad that Jersey and Tim liked it as well. All right, when we get back from this quick break, we're going to be talking about what it means to bag your hops, all of the different ways to do it, and we'll get into some methods. Stick with us. Shopping for brewing supplies online can be a real hassle, which is why we recommend Love to Brew. They've got great prices, super fast shipping, and they carry exclusive products like East Coast Yeast, the Brewer's Essentials brand, and their award-winning beer recipe kits. They're also the only place you can pick up your very own Brülosophy recipe kit. The numbers don't lie. Love to Brew has hundreds of 5-star reviews, and thousands of brewers are choosing them for their supplies and ingredients each year. Experience the difference at lovetobrew.com. That's love, the number 2, brew.com. After a long brew day, the last thing I want to do is waste time chilling work, which is why I use cleverly designed immersion chillers from Jaded Brewing. After some bad experiences with counterflow and plate chillers, I began the search for a more efficient chilling solution and discovered Jaded. That was nearly 4 years ago, and to this day, I continue to rely on the King Cobra and the Hydra to chill my wort in record time without the setup or cleaning hassle of other chillers. If you're looking for a way to optimize your brew day, I can't recommend Jaded chillers enough. Go see what they have to offer at jadedbrewing.com and let them know Brülosophy sent you. The best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world. Find everything from classics to modern favorites, as well as cool experimental varieties and a vast array of ingredients and gear at yakimavalleyhops.com. Founded in 1978 by brewing pioneer Charlie Papazian, the American Homebrewers Association is a division of the Brewers Association focused specifically on protecting and promoting the hobby of homebrewing. In addition to their work lobbying for the rights of homebrewers across the country, they're also the primary sponsor of Brülosophy.com. By joining the AHA, not only are you supporting their cause, but you get a ton of benefits as well. Discounts at breweries across the U.S., early access to tickets for events like the Great American Beer Festival, and you get to attend HomebrewCon, the world's biggest gathering of homebrewers. Head over to Brülosophy.com/AHA now to sign up to become a member. So filtering hops is one of those, it sounds really simple, but there are various methods for doing it. There are various reasons people might do it. Let's start at the beginning, Jason. What's the reason, what exactly is filtering hops and what's the purpose of it?
The biggest thing or aspect of it is just getting the hop debris out of whether it's your wort or your beer after it's fermented. I've personally have racked beer into a keg where I did not filter my hops, and I actually had a poppet that got clogged and I had to transfer to a different keg, and all of that could have been avoided if I would have filtered either the dry hops or the trub from when I originally had brewed that batch.
Right. And there are I think there are various reasons people might filter, and then with each of those reasons comes some purported downsides. I think
Sure.
What I hear most often are folks who use pumps, or have bottom valves on their kettles in order to keep the trub out of their fermenter, and that's one main reason for filtering hops in the kettle. Interestingly, and we're not going to get too much on the impact of trub here. We've got a whole episode dedicated to that. But I think one of the big ideas is to keep that trub out of the fermenter, because there's this fear that transferring those hops with the wort into the fermenter is going to in some way impart some undesirable flavor to the beer.
Yeah, exactly. And it's something that, on the surface of it, and like you said, we're not going to get too deep into it, it's a valid concern to have, especially with everything that the hops, the transition they go through during the boil, and now you're fermenting with them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know, probably when I really started digging into how to treat my hops in the kettle and in the dry hop, one of the biggest concerns I had was, and what I read in a few places was that as the longer those hops are in contact with the liquid, whether that's wort or beer, the higher risk you get of that chlorophyll kind of flavor, that grassy plant flavor. And, I don't want that in my beer. And that was a big reason I started, when I did my transition from extract to all grain, that I chose to filter my hops. And, I went to Home Depot and I grabbed myself some paint strainer bags. I think you get like 3 for $6, and they worked fantastic for that purpose. There were, some concerns I had with the material, but I think they're made of nylon. That didn't seem to have any issue, and the beers I was making were pretty good. I know that there are quite a few other techniques for these days, especially for filtering hops in the kettle.
Yeah, so I actually did something similar to you with the paint strainer bag. After I experienced my first clogging of a plate chiller / pump from just throwing hops into the boil, I decided to build my own hop spider. So basically what that is a bag on top of the boil kettle that holds the hops within it, and it allows them to still, get the boiling wort all around them and interact, but yet you can pull that hop spider out at any time or towards the end of the boil, and you leave very little hop debris in there. And so what I did to make that was I bought the hop or the paint straining bags like you did, 5-gallon bags. I think I paid something like $6 like you as well for 3 or 4 of them. And then I got one of the stainless steel ring inserts that are for sinks. So they make them, and I think they're like 3.5 inches wide, and they're about $20 at Lowe's or Home Depot. And then I got some stainless steel leg bolts and drilled 3 holes into the stainless steel sink ring and used those to set and hold the ring itself above the boil kettle, and then just with a worm clamp held the bag onto the ring itself, and it's real easy to clean up. You just flip the bag inside out, rinse it out, and it keeps a lot more of the debris out of your boil.
Yeah, I've seen builds for these all over the internet. I've never made one myself. I kind of did the cheap approach of just getting a clamp of some sort, and then just kind of clamping the bag to the side of my kettle and hoping it doesn't touch the bottom,
Absolutely.
Yeah. That nylon will, if you have a really hot burner, just a little a little advice here, make sure you keep that bag away from the flame, because it will melt. I've done that quite a few times. In fact, there's a reason I don't have any more of those paint strainer bags. And if it touches the bottom of the kettle, it can get a little too hot as well, and maybe melt a little bit. So be careful with that. I've been using, or I have used, brew in a bag bags. In fact, Rex from the Brew Bag, he recommends for people who want to filter their hops, if you're using the brew in a bag method, you remove your grains as your wort is coming up to a boil. You can clean the bag out, which is super easy. Those bags are a cinch to clean. And then you bring the bag back, place it back in your kettle off the bottom of the kettle, clamp it in place, and then you can just do your entire boil with all the hops in, just like you're adding them straight to the boil, typically. But then at the end, it's just easy cleanup. You just remove the bag and your hops are all in that. Pretty sweet. I've done that a few times.
Yeah, I haven't done the repurposed brew in a bag. I have done just like the hop socks, the little tiny socks that you could get at the local homebrew supply store, and tied them off and just thrown them in there and thrown them away at the end of the day if I didn't feel like cleaning out the hop spider. I've done that as well.
Yeah. One of the issues with using those hop socks, something that I've heard about at least, is that they're so small that depending on how much hops you put in there, it can be so compact that the wort doesn't actually access. You can't get like full extraction, all of that stuff. Like there needs to be some flow. And I've seen people, they're putting hops in and then they're tying a knot at the top, very top of the hop. So it's just this kind of like round ball of hops that they end up throwing into the kettle. I've never done that. I'd be curious to see what kind of impact that has. Are you getting the same extraction, the same isomerization and all of that stuff? I really don't know.
That was something I was doing, a year and a half ago. The beers came out fine, but whether or not they could have been better, I can't say.
Yeah, right. Another popular method for filtering hops in the kettle is to use these seem to have gotten really popular over the last couple of years. They're stainless, kind of like hop spiders, but they usually have an arm that hangs on the side of your kettle, and it just kind of hangs out in the wort the entire boil, and you toss all your hops in there. I know people who have had some really great experiences with that. In fact, a local friend of mine swears by his. Super easy to clean, does the same purpose. There are a million ways to skin this cat, and if what you're looking for is to filter out those hops in your kettle, there's those. When you're going into the dry hop, that's another big one because of I think for a lot of people who have bottom ports on their fermenters, the issue is, are those hops going to clog my port, which is kind of defeats the purpose of having the port if you have to use some sort of a racking cane to get the beer out of the fermenter. I say that because this has happened to me multiple times. I've been largely a loose dry hopper. And last time I did that, it was a pain in the ass. I'll be honest. I ended up clogging the port. It was one of those kegging days where I just wanted to ram my head through a window.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So with dry hopping, I think a lot of it comes down to, like you said, the bottom port on the fermenter, but as well, there's the option of cold crashing, which should settle a lot of that stuff out. And up until recently, I haven't had the capacity to cold crash stuff in the fermenter the way I would have liked to. So up until now, I have been doing just strictly put them in a bag, throw them in, hope everything turns out okay. And so far it has, but I definitely want to try cold crashing with just loose hops in there and see if I'm able to clear it out and how that works out for me.
Yeah, it cold crashing absolutely drops hops out of solution. I think anyone who's ever cold crashed has noticed that. My thing is that I use the SS BrewTech those stainless brew buckets, and the port on that, it comes with a racking arm or what are those called? The stainless elbow that you connect to the back of the port, and so you can set that to where you think it's gonna be above the trube line. When you're making a New England IPA and you're tossing, a ton of hops in for the dry hop at two different points, my experience was that hop line wasn't low enough to be below the port, and so that was the one that was just an absolute mess for me. And it it inspired me to start using these stainless sleeves when I'm dry hopping. So I do that. The question becomes, I guess, is this having some sort of an impact on flavor? And, back in the day when I was filtering all of my hops out of my kettle, which I don't do anymore, I stopped doing it just because it seemed easier not to. I have one less thing to clean, sure, I guess. But the question became, what is that bag introducing? Is there anything that it's introducing? Is it holding on? This is the argument that I really liked, Is that bag attaching to some of the terpenes and some of the oils from those hops? And then when you remove the bag, you're taking some of that away. So is there a decrease in aroma and flavor?
Yeah, and I think that's the question, and it's a valid concern that everyone has. And when you try to look into it, no one really has an answer. I mean, I spent, a few hours the other day looking for a concrete, definitive source on, yes, the bag is impacting all of this. No, it's not. And what you really find is hundreds and hundreds of forum posts of someone who's just getting into brewing, or maybe has been brewing for a while and they're thinking of starting to bag or ditching a bag. And it's just a lot of questions without any real solid answers, and it all boils down to personal preference.
Well, yeah, there's a ton of anecdote on this variable. Surprising amount of anecdotal stories with people who, for example, weren't bagging their hops, started bagging their hops, and then what do you know, their next beer wasn't as hoppy as their last one to their palate, right? But like you said, I was digging around for research on this as well, and this doesn't seem to be a variable that university brewing science programs are terribly interested in investigating.
No. It's always like a cliff note when they talk about hopping. Towards the bottom of it, it says something along, if you want to bag your hops, go ahead and do that too. Yeah. There's never a section dedicated to pros and cons of bagging hops. It's always just like, yeah, we'll mention it, but we're going to keep going. Right.
Well, and I don't think, I don't think on the professional scale, which is really what these research programs are set up to test for. But I don't think on the professional scale too many. I don't think Stone or Sierra Nevada is terribly concerned with the impact a bag has on their on their next batch of pale ale.
Yeah, they're not doing it at all.
Yeah. So which is cool for us because we are homebrew experimenters, and so this is something that matters in our small little world. And so we were curious enough to put it to the test. What is your? So you said you do this hybrid thing. So you are bagging in your boil, but you toss them loose into your dry hop?
Nope, the exact opposite. So I toss them loose into the boil and then bag and dry hop. And I also use SS Brewtech buckets, and I've always been afraid of that tube line coming above the bottom arm, just in the way you were as well. And so I've always just not taken that chance. But yeah, so right now, all loose into the boil and then bag them up for dry hopping.
So you're brewing mostly on the Grainfather systems right now. Which have a small pump to recirculate, and how is that working out for you on the Grainfather system?
So this far, I've maxed out at 4 ounces of hops during the boil, late additions and Whirlpool. I think 4 ounces is right about where I've ended up, and I didn't have any issues. I didn't do a strong Whirlpool, which is, stirring the wort at the end of the boil really, really fast. So it creates a nice hop cone in the middle on the bottom and gets all the tube into the middle away from the pump inlet. But I have yet to have any issues with the pump clogging or the counterflow chiller that is included with the Grainfather setup. But yet you could go on and read horror stories where someone got the pump clogged with 1 ounce of hops. I have yet to experience that. So far so good for me. Knock on wood, of course. 4 ounces is quite a bit to see sitting in the bottom of that and realize that, nothing got messed up as far as the pump goes.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, I have to imagine, I've met the folks from Grainfather that they thought about this, beforehand. And I got to brew on one as well. And when I was in New Zealand last year, and we tossed all the hops in straight. There was no issues either.
Yep.
I boil in a standard 20-gallon kettle. The SS Brewtech has the Brewmaster edition kettles, which they have a concave bottom that's really deep, and it's super convenient. Now, these kettles are all set up to have a pump installed and all of that. I don't use pumps very often in my brewery. Again, I try not to dirty things up that I don't need. But what I love is that basically all of the trube falls into this concave bottom, and the racking port, the valve, is just high enough to where it like leaves everything behind. It works really, really well. So it hasn't been. I have not bagged my hops in the kettle. God, I think last time I did it was for this experiment that we're going to talk about in a bit. I just don't see. I don't have a need for it. When I was using pumps, I had, I went through that thing that I think a lot of brewers go through, where they start small and then they build up this kind of quasi professional looking system. And then I was like, God, brewing sucks now. I hate setting it up, and I do all that. So I kind of ditched all the pumps and I moved back to a more simple setup. But when I had those pumps, I definitely clogged multiple times, and so I started bagging my hops again.
You don't have to put hardly anything in there, and it clogs it up.
Yeah, and it was, oh my God, and then the worst part for me was, and the reason that I was huge, like I bagged everything that went into the wort after this, is after you clear that clog and everything gets going smoothly, and you finish your brew day. My experience was I would go and clean my pump, and I had a plate chiller at the time as well. And I would go clean them for 20 minutes. I would spend so much time flushing these things back and forth and cleaning them as good as I could. And then on my next brew day, when I go to start my sanitation recirculation, for the last 15 minutes, all of this black crud would come flying out of the plate chiller and the pump, and it was just disgusting. So for me, that didn't happen when I started bagging my hops. So it did make it. It was like a pragmatic method for me at that point. Just made brewing a whole hell of a lot easier with when using pumps and whatnot.
Yeah, I'm with you, man.
And then for on the dry hop front, again, I know I spoke a little bit about it earlier. For me, I stopped doing it because, again, I didn't see a need. And when I was using the 6-gallon PET carboys, it was so easy for me when racking the beer out to just, put the end of the siphon high enough to where it wouldn't suck any of the hops out. So it wasn't really an issue. Going back to these stainless brew buckets with the spigots on the bottom, again, when I put hops in these stainless sleeves, they stay in there. There's a lot of room in them. So they're all getting contact with the beer. It's been working really well for me. So that's what I've been doing. The question, again, is it having an impact on the character or the quality of the beer that we're making? That's exactly what we're going to address when we come back from this break. When dumping wort-soaked grain and leftover low-gravity wort while cleaning up after a brew day, did you ever wonder what your true efficiency would be if that wort made its way to the kettle instead? Using the brew bag, a fabric filter for all mash tuns and brewing methods, allows you to capture every last drop of wort. Not only does this increase kettle efficiency, it lowers your grain bill, which saves you money. Throwing wort in the trash is like dumping a 12-pack down the drain and just doesn't make sense. Use the brew bag and leave no wort behind. I've been using these filters for a long time and recommend them to everyone. I never have to worry about a stuck sparge, and cleanup is fast and easy. Go grab yourself a brew bag fabric filter at brewinabag.com and be sure to use code TBP17 at checkout to get a discount on your order.
Compact and simple to use with a small footprint for brewing indoors, the Grainfather makes it easy for you to brew professional quality beers at home. The Grainfather is an all-in-one brewing system that lets you brew all grain beer in a single compact stainless steel unit. It uses an electric heating element and pump to maintain a constant temperature and to circulate the wort during the mashing and cooling stages. It also comes with a counterflow chiller to reduce chilling times and produce high-quality wort. And now, with the addition of their conical fermenter, the Grainfather takes things one step further by offering homebrewers state-of-the-art temperature-controlled fermentation just like commercial breweries use. And with the Grainfather Recipe Creator and Connect app, you can easily design a recipe, sync your brewing system with your phone, and then just sit back and relax as the app takes over and assures that you maintain your scheduled mash temps and boil schedule. Head to Grainfather.com to purchase your all-in-one brewing system today and to sign up for their free recipe creator tool. Once more, head on over to Grainfather.com, that's Grainfather.com, and get started today.
So last year at some point, it was March of 2016, curious whether, filtering hops out of the kettle had any impact on the quality of beer. I'll admit, I kind of didn't think it would make a difference at all. I designed an experiment to test it out where I brewed 2 batches of the same exact beer. It was a Mirror Pond Pale Ale clone, both of which had a pretty hefty dose of hops in the kettle.
Yeah, it looks like you used 80 grams of hops total, some Cascade at 60 minutes in the boil, 30 and 5 for a total of 55 grams of Cascade. And then you did a Centennial at 10 minute with 25 grams. That's a pretty good amount of hops.
Yeah. So all of those went into the kettle. My thinking about this one was to avoid the dry hop because I wanted to test that out on its own. And we eventually did. So this one was all kettle hops. All of those hops were either filtered or tossed in loosely. And otherwise, these batches were treated exactly the same. They were fermented with the Fuller strain. Both batches, all the numbers hit the same. Everything between them was good. And then once the beers were done, and the beers, by the way, were pretty good. This is I think I said a Mirror Pond Pale Ale clone. That's from Deschutes Brewery. If you like classic pale ale, go get yourself some Deschutes Mirror Pond. It's really good.
Yeah, it is good.
Yeah, I love that beer. So when the beers were done, they were all cleared up. I served them to 26 different participants. Now, with 26 participants, 14 people would have to identify the unique sample in the triangle test in order for us to say that these beers were significantly different, or that tasters could reliably distinguish the odd beer out. And 14 tasters is exactly the number that were able to distinguish the beer in the triangle test, which was pretty shocking to me. I was, it was completely... In my mind, these beers weren't going to be different. I had trained myself to think that by filtering hops out of the kettle, there really wasn't going to be a difference. And yet we've got data sitting here right in front of us telling me that, yes, people can actually taste a difference in these on a statistically significant level. It was pretty shocking.
Yeah, when I was reading through this just a couple days ago in preparation for this podcast, I was going through, I forgot all about what the results were. And once I got down to the results, I just sat there and I was like, what? Wait, no, it shouldn't be like that. In my own personal experience, and obviously extremely biased, but I expected these beers to be indistinguishable.
Yeah. Well, and so one of the big things about filtering hops out of the kettle is that some of the bitterness is going to be impacted. So that by, if you have a filter in the kettle and you toss hops in that, those isoalpha acids are going to stick to that filter and not go into your beer. I always thought that was just, BS. Like, yeah, whatever. It's not that big of a deal. Interestingly, for me, the bagged hop beer, what I perceived it as being somewhat less bitter, as having more maltiness to it. They tasted different, and I was able to tell them apart pretty consistently. How in the world can a filter really attach onto whatever it is that's in there that's causing this beer to taste more bitter or more flavorful or have more aroma? It doesn't make much sense to me.
Right. When anyone who's ever done a triangle test, it's hard. Even when we do them on our own beers and we know the variables, it is sometimes really, really hard to tell the beers apart and get it right. So when you were having this much of a success at being able to differentiate between the two beers, obviously there was a difference, not only in the data, but also in your personal trials as well.
Yeah. Well, I was curious enough to see if there really was like an actual difference in bitterness, to send samples to our friends at Oregon Brew Lab for IBU testing. And I always love when we do this because it's, like hard data to go with our soft sensory data. Again, one of the biggest differentiating factors between these beers to my palate was the level of bitterness that I perceived. And I believe they say that it's kind of commonly said that humans have the ability to perceive about a 5 IBU difference, 5 to 10 IBU difference, something like that.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too.
Yeah. So when I sent these in, I was fully expecting the bagged hop beer to be like, 10 IBU difference from the loose one, just based on the flavor. That wasn't the case, not even close. In fact, the bagged hop beer came back with an IBU of 25, and the loose hop beer had a whopping 2 point difference at 27 IBU. So these beers, I mean, that to me, and that's a plus or minus one, error. So they're basically the same. I mean, they were basically the same bitterness. It can be argued that by adding the bag that, you lost some IBU, but really they were about the same and yet still noticeably different.
Yeah, and what's even more crazy about this is the fact that the IBUs from Oregon Brew Lab were so much lower than what you expected from BEERsmith, or at least what BEERsmith predicted for you. But you account for that plus or minus one variance, and they, at least scientifically, are the same beers as far as IBUs go.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and we've seen this almost every time we've done IBU testing, lab analysis, like actually measuring bitterness in the beer. BEERsmith said that and I believe I was using the Tinsith formula for this one. BEERsmith said I was going to have an IBU of 43.8 for these beers. So 44 basically. 25 and 27 are what came back from the lab. Every time we do this, my faith in those existing formulas it gets cracked. It's starting to fade away because it doesn't. And those beers were still perfectly fine. They were totally bitter.
Yeah. They still have the right amount as far as your palate goes, but the numbers just don't line up for whatever reason.
Yeah, somebody needs to get out there and invent a real, like an actually accurate IBU formula, because it doesn't make any sense to me that we're relying on this thing that you can't be confirmed by lab analysis. It's almost like, when I'm designing a beer now, I still use those formulas because it's what I know. So like I know that 66 IBU in a West Coast IPA is going to work out fine. Even if I get that tested in the lab, it's going to be something like 38 or whatever.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be completely different.
Yeah, but it's almost like I can rely on this thing that's not really real only because it's my marker. It's like a reference,
Yep.
Yeah, kind of interesting. So anyways, so bagged kettle hops really did seem to have an impact on the characteristics of the beer. The thing is, it again, and we see this with most of the significant experiments, preference between tasters was pretty much split. So, while they were different, it didn't necessarily mean that one way was better than the other. People liked both beers equally fine. I recall them both being totally fine beers. My preference was for the loose hopped one because I did perceive it as being a little bit less. I like malty beers, but in a pale ale, I would kind of want that more crisp, dry, sharper type of flavors. And that's what I got out of the loose hop one over the bagged hop one. But anyways, this inspired my interest. And so I designed the follow-up experiment, which was just to test the impact of filtering dry hops. And this one we did last, I was doing it last year during HomebrewCon, just as you and I started chatting, Jason.
Well, that's serendipity for you.
Oh.
So it looks like you did a Give Me That Sack Pale Ale. Well, I didn't name it.
Yeah, I know I did. There's a great song by Eazy-E that I was kind of alluding to.
Oh, cool.
This was actually a split. I did the Hop Chronicles on an Azacca Pale Ale, and I thought, we dry hop the heck out of those beers.
Sure.
Might as well turn it into an experiment as well. So this was an Azacca Pale Ale that was hopped pretty heavily in the dry hop. One batch got filtered, and the other batch didn't.
So it looks like you used 90 grams of hops of Azacca for the 3-day dry hop. That's quite a bit.
Yeah, that's almost 3 ounces.
Yeah, man, that's a good amount.
Yeah, no, a ton of hops. And in my opinion, a great for this experiment because I really wanted to see, does the amount of hops, does bagging that large amount of hops have an impact as compared to tossing them in loosely? The beers were treated exactly the same otherwise, just as we always do. And when they were done, I kegged them up. It looks like everything finished at, I think the loose hopped one finished at 10:07 and the bagged dry hop batch finished at 10:06. Whatever. That's about the same. That's going to happen. Both beers, ended up coming out pretty clear. I did find them with gelatin. And interestingly, the loose hopped beer seems seemed to have clear up a little bit better than the bagged hop one, which was the first indication to me that maybe these things might be different. That there's something happening, or something like leaching from the bag or something that's gonna that maintains that kept the beer more hazy.
Yeah, it looks like the bagged one has a little bit more of a haze to it.
Yeah, and it maintained that the entire time. So, that was, again, my first indication maybe these are going to be different. I served the beers to 21 different people and had them for the triangle test. And in order for us to say that this was significantly a significant finding, 12 of those tasters would have had to correctly identify the unique sample. And interestingly, only 9 were able to pick the odd beer out, which means that these beers weren't reliably distinguishable by that particular sample of participants. To me, doing these beers, trying triangle tests with these beers, despite knowing the variable very well and having brewed the beers, they were exactly the same. I could not tell these beers apart, despite them looking different as well.
Yeah, and that's kind of what my experiences have been as well, and that's what I expected the outcome of this one to be. Is these beers more or less will be identical,
right?
And
so it was weird because for the kettle hop experiment, I was totally convinced they weren't going to be different, and they were. So that kind of influenced me to thinking, these ones are going to be different, and they weren't. So, I was all mixed up in my mind. But ultimately, it was kind of confirming to know that you can bag your dry hops. And now, something to keep in mind, I did not cinch this bag. There was a lot of room in the bag for those hops to expand. As anybody who's ever dry hopped in a bag knows, those hops, when they hit that beer, they are going to expand. And I had enough room in this bag so that once they expanded, there was still some space in there so that, the beer could contact the hops. But yeah, you can bag up your dry hops and it doesn't seem like it's going to have any impact on the character of that beer. It was identical to the one where the hops were tossed in loose.
Did you lose a lot of volume when you bagged?
Oh, that's a good reason, that I hear for people bagging is that when they take it out, I didn't lose any volume. Now to answer your question, but I rack, a little over 5.5 gallons of wort to my fermenters before pitching the yeast, sometimes upwards to 6 gallons if I know I'm going to be adding a lot of dry hops. But in my experience, I actually lose more volume when I don't bag, which maybe that's just wrong, and my memory's bad. But when I feel like when I bag, I can take those hops out and let them drip, or even, I don't usually remove them from my fermenter. And nowadays I'm using these stainless sleeves, and so there's nothing, I can't squeeze the hops or anything like that. But I feel like I'm able to get more beer out of my fermenter when I do that than when I don't. And again, a large part of it is that's those hops aren't covering my the racking port.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I just brewed a Melvin IPA clone for a club competition here, and dry hopping had 20.5 ounces of dry hops. The recipe called for. Yeah, so I think I racked like 6 gallons in, anticipating to lose at least a gallon. And I bagged them. I didn't do it loose because that's just way too much for any fermenter, I think, to deal with the racking arm and whatnot. And I think I lost right at half a gallon, maybe a little bit more than that, which was totally surprising to me. I didn't lose nearly as much as I anticipated.
Yeah, I actually don't think it's so when I think about it, like, I'm not sure it's that I'm losing volume when I dry hop loose. I think it's that because of the nature of my fermentation vessel, and so my system kind of specific to what I do, I'm unable to get as much clean beer out of the fermenter when I dry hop loosely as opposed to when I don't. And I'll be honest, the dry hop, the bag dry hop experiment absolutely influenced me. It was after this that I think it was the following month that I went to eBay and found these really rad stainless sleeves. I just keep them in my, I'll sanitize them in a bucket of sanitizer, pull them out wet, toss the dry hops in there. You screw the cap on, so none of those hops are going to get out of there. And then you just drop it into your beer. And, you can't do that in a carboy. They won't fit in a carboy. But if you have a wide open ferment, like a wide mouth fermenter, you can easily just plop this thing in there. Super easy to clean. They're stainless. I love them. I use them every time I dry hop now.
I have one of those, but I haven't dry hopped it during fermentation. What I usually do is I use that to dry hop in the keg, and I've done it a couple times with mixed results, but it's kept all the debris out and everything that I don't want in there. But I'll have to try dry hopping with that in the fermenter.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned dry hopping in the keg. Very popular method these days. What with the popularity of New England IPA,
exactly.
And these, if you're going to dry hop in the keg, you really need to have something to filter those hops out. Otherwise, you're just going to suck them up. They'll clog your dip tube. It just creates a mess. One way to do that is the stainless things. You can use the bags that we've talked about before. And I know a lot of people like to suspend the hops. They'll use like some flavor-free floss or whatever. Yeah, exactly. And suspend the hops in the keg. I'm back to filtering out my dry hops, but I'm still not. I'm still tossing all my hops in loose to the kettle. And I would have to say that this experiment absolutely did influence me. If somebody were to ask me for advice on what to do, I think my advice would center on their system. What works for you. While it does seem that kettle hops might have this impact, it's pretty minimal. And I think you can easily make up for it by just tossing in, another half ounce of hops or something like that. What about you, Jason?
Yeah, I'm with you as well. If someone's going to ask me, or someone does ask me what my preference or suggestion to them would be, it really is all based on your equipment. Don't take it too seriously one way or the other. There may be a perceptible difference in the kettle hops, but like you said, it's not that much. And if it's going to make your brew day 10, 20, 30 minutes quicker and you have less to clean if you bag them, do it. Whatever works best for your setup.
Yep. All right, man. Anything else on bagging hops?
No, I think we covered it all.
Right on, man. Well, if anyone wants to read about the 2 experiments we talked about on the show today, or any of the other crazy stuff we're up to, you can head over to Brülosophy.com and find it all there. The Brülosophy podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors, as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to Brülosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit Patreon.com/Brülosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brülosophy podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey cause it soothes my throat. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman no more.